Anger is a really intriguing emotion, I feel. And we would do very well to learn to control it. Because if we don't control it, it presents itself in the world, and slowly but surely, it will begin to damage us. Because to be known as an angry person, this is not a compliment. I once worked for a man, and all he did was scream at his employees. And the parking lot, of course, was filled with expensive cars, Mercedes-Benz, BMW. So they were making so much money that they couldn't quit. They couldn't. But he would berate them. It was just horrible to watch. And he never screamed at me. I was quite fortunate, I felt. But other people, gosh, receive so much abuse. So anger itself is an uncontrolled emotion, because we can't control anger. And usually all of us feel anger on a daily basis. We feel perhaps anger at the injustice of life. We can feel angry at age, at our social circumstance, our color, our ethnicity, our sex. It goes on. There's an awful lot to be angry about. But what's so strange about anger, in my estimation, is that it is extremely individual and we don't quite understand. Because if I say, I love you, everyone understands immediately. I love you like a father, a brother, a lover, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a parent. It goes on, right? Everyone understands love. It is, of course, universal, and this is what Jesus is known for from his Sermon on the Mount, right? That we must be loving, peaceful people. And it was only St. Augustine, some 400 years later or so, that actually altered this. And you get the just war concept, which was once again in the 13th century was adopted by St. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, the just war. How bizarre. A just war to kill you. Makes no sense to me, for sure. But this is how Jesus' message of peace and love became twisted and convoluted. So I think we must control this anger. If I say, I'm angry at you, most people do not understand. How are you angry at me? I've done something wrong, or you don't like my moral stance, or whatever it is. We're confused by anger, but we all understand love, which means that anger, unfortunately, is extremely unique to the individual. Some feel it more than others, obviously, quite obviously. So, what should I do when I become angry? Because usually it makes a person feel rather nauseated, right? Well, the first thing you'll have to do is you have to somehow mentally pause and breathe deeply. Slow breaths to tell your body to calm down. And then remind yourself, because anger, I think, is like a wave. It just comes over you and down into your mind, out through your mouth, right? Say to yourself, wait a moment, I can feel this great poison coursing through me at this moment. So if possible, detach yourself, walk away, and then remind yourself that the other person who perhaps is provoking this anger, they might be one of the poor and unwashed, right? Psychologically, figuratively speaking, they might really be having a difficult time, totally fearful. So it behooves us to train ourselves for these kinds of people, right? behooves ourselves to do that. And I just like to leave you with some philosophers, what they say about anger. Aristotle, he says, anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, he says, anger, an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. So in other words, anger only poisons me. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, famous for the Meditations, his great book. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? The Buddha, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. But you are the one who gets burned. Another philosopher, Epictetus, Stoic, when you are offended at any man's fault, tune to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. Hard to do, for sure. St. Thomas Aquinas, anger should align with charity and justice, never with cruelty. And then ultimately, Jesus tells us that we must go inside ourselves. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder. Whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the court. And whoever says, you despicable fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. And finally, in Matthew, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. Because be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. So, there we are, some thoughts on anger. And I think it is very important in the world we occupy today because we live in, basically, according to the internet, we live in an angry world. And it's just not real, to be honest, because you know yourself when you go into a park or take a walk, perhaps in nature, whatever that means, along the beach, it's a wonderful life and a magnificent world. And all of these emotions that swirl inside of me can be contained because they are my own. The classic question, who makes you angry? I do. I'm the only person who can make me angry, as strange as it sounds. Right? So I guess this includes me. Of course, we all must control our anger. Find a way to find the joy in life, in all circumstances. And you know what they say? Critical thinking is necessary, especially if we're going to control our anger. And critical thinking is great, truly great. You take care. God bless. Bye-bye. Hello, this is Leon here. This is our 19th day on the El Camino. Today we went from Derradilos de las Templarias to Bercianos del Real Camino. Forgive my bad Spanish. So it was quite a cool day in the morning, and then we had a very long trek on the plain, just hot, and we finally arrived in our waypoint at about 4:30. So overall, it was a really good day. But we had an incident last night that we'd like to share with you. And so today our theme will be about anger. Now, on the El Camino, on the average year, there are 2 to 300,000 people, a lot of people. And you'll find that when you sleep with beside people that you don't even know, they have habits that are irritating. And you must say to yourself very quickly, I can tolerate almost anything. It's like your brother or your sister. You just have to tolerate who they are, and you might not like it. But as they get older, you eventually explain, I don't like you listening to music, for instance, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they respond accordingly. But our incident was about a man. I fell asleep. I was exhausted last night, and I fell asleep, and I still had my night light on. Everyone has these flashlights on their head because the lights are turned off at 10 o'clock normally. So I had this flashlight on my head, and I fell asleep, and the light remained on. And then about half an hour later, one man started to scream. He slammed the door, and he turned that light off, and things along this nature. And David was good enough to explain that I was asleep. I, I didn't understand his anger at all. And so David turned the light off, and everything calmed down. But I thought to myself, today we talk a little bit about anger. Anger is something all of us experience. And I think at its most simple, anger's divided into two streams. There's anger that we receive immediately, perhaps a hot flush across our face and over our head, down our body, down the small of our back. And then there's deep-seated long-term anger, resentment, bitterness, etc. Now, the question becomes, how do you deal with anger? Because anger is not like love. If I say, I love you, everyone understands. I love you like a father. I love you like a brother, a sister, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. We all understand love, for sure. But if I say I'm angry at you, how are you angry at me? You don't like the way I look, the way I act. We're very confused with anger because it's not a natural state. So, with short term anger, as it's called, what one must do, I'm told and I've read, that you must somehow, as you feel the wave rushing over you down to your mouth, you must restrict that. You must not speak. You must go, for instance, take a walk, just walk away, but don't speak, because for sure what comes out of your mouth will be vile and it'll damage you long term, no question. Now, long term anger, as it's called, is much more dangerous because it affects your organs, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, etc. And usually, angry people don't live long, happy lives. So say to yourself, this is one emotion that is not positive, and I must learn to control it if I'm going to live, if I'm going to live a fulfilling and interesting life. Now, I'll pass you over to Dave for his comments.
Going back to the situation at the hostel we were staying at, I just thought to myself as the whole thing occurred, why? What's the need of getting so angry and so upset over something so little? At this point in the journey, we've all discovered each other's idiosyncrasies, our differences. For some, it might be crumpling and crinkling a crisps packet at 4 in the morning. For others, it might be knocking over a water bottle at 5 and hearing the loud clang as it hits the floor. In this case, it was one man who obviously fell asleep with his light on, and as the other person said, he said, "Turn that light off." And I just looked at him and I said, "Sir, I think he's asleep." And if he would have looked, he could have seen that Leon was sleeping. So, what's the point of getting angry over something such as this? This is a lesson I've learned long ago. I used to work in a kindergarten for many years, and I would see some of my colleagues getting so angry at some of the children. And there were times that I would become frustrated, but I always tried to be patient because I thought to myself, these are 4, 5, 6 year old children. Children are innocent. They're not trying to cause trouble. Some of them can be mischievous. Some might try to push your buttons a bit. But children are innocent. They're not trying to be a trouble or a burden. And they're not trying to make you angry. So I always try to maintain a calm, peaceful demeanor and explain to them, okay, Johnny, you can't do this because XYZ. Or have you thought about Sarah and how she feels if you do this? And usually it worked. Some of my other colleagues, however, would just fly off the handle and yell at the students, 5 years old or 6, and you could tell in the child's face he or she had no idea what he or she had done wrong. What good is that? Going off from this topic of anger, I think that there's a lot of people in the world who could use to walk a Camino such as the El Camino de Santiago, which Leon and I are doing. And this isn't just for religious or spiritual reasons. It's also for other reasons. All of the people on this walk, we all have a common goal, and there's a camaraderie that's shared between us. And I think it really helps being thrust into an environment with people of different backgrounds, people who are different, have different habits, people of different socio-economic classes. Because there's a lot of time on this trip where we can talk. Because what else can we do? We're walking, and we're walking for 5 or 6 or 7 hours with heavy packs on our backs and talking to others and learning a bit about their culture and their life offers us just a slight respite from the pain that our feet and our ankles and our knees and bodies are feeling. And I feel that by learning about others, we can come to accept those who are different, and it can help us tame our own anger towards other people. Now back to Leon.
So, to finish off with the story, recently I watched a man driving in a very expensive car abruptly stop at a stoplight, and he was a little bit too abrupt. There was an old man behind him in an old car, and he slightly touched the back of the Mercedes Benz. And the driver of the Mercedes Benz jumped out of the car, good looking, muscular, obviously wealthy, and he began to berate the old man. And I'm watching all this because the old man's passenger door window was rolled down. Obviously, no air conditioning, obviously, no money. And it was a little bit like watching a cat kill a mouse, in a sense. And it was painful because it was totally unnecessary. So you lose face, you lose power, I think, if you do this, because your social class is already elevated. So this is exceptionally true with the people that are of a lower socioeconomic quality than you are, socioeconomic class. Be patient with everyone. Most human beings are decent, and they're just trying to get on with life and be somewhat successful. But on a more positive note, today we received our halfway certificates. We got a very formal document. We'll post those up so you can have a look, right? And it was really, in a certain sense of the word, it's an accomplishment for all of us because you've been following us on this trek, and hopefully this will motivate everyone to try it as well. Because though it's arduous, as David has said, and as he also said, we learn something about ourselves and about other human beings. It's really, truly a very humbling experience. And you know what they say. You have a nice evening, and God bless. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.